Alright everyone, welcome back to another episode of the CPP for Beginners.com Java for Beginners tutorials for University of Reddit. Whew. Gotta take a deep inhale before that one. I've decided that I'm actually going to forego having more simple tutorials, and we're going to jump right into if statements. I do so kind of with a heavy heart because I feel like I should give you more, but I really think that if statements are one of the more misunderstood things in programming. When you should use them, when you shouldn't, how to use them, what their syntax is, etc. So with that said, I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about the logic behind an if statement before we get started on one. Now, I want to show you guys what an if statement looks like before I really explain what they do. So we're going to take the word if, and let's make a variable and just say int a equals 4. And we'll just say if a equals, two equal signs by the way, 4. And then we have scope brackets. You don't need scope brackets, but you should always use them until when I tell you why not to. If you don't have them there, you will cause yourself a lot more problems. And then the inside of a statement is really just, I'll do this as a comment, do stuff here. And now I want to teach you what is really going on here. So, alright. This A is clearly representing 4. These two equal signs are not the same as the equal signs we've been using. They're actually known as Boolean, as a Boolean operator. And what a Boolean operator does is it tests whether or not something is true or false. So what that checks is basically is A equal to 4? Question mark. Whereas if it's 1, it is actually A is now equal to 4. So that's kind of the difference between a single equal and a double equal. And you'll notice if I have a single equal there, it's going to tell me that it's looking for a Boolean and not an int. So basically, the contents of this are actually known as an if conditional. And what an if conditional is whether or not the stuff inside of this if statement will take place. Because let's say I change this value. Well, actually, let's keep it as 4 for a second. Let's do a system.out.println, and we'll say we're inside an if statement. Okay? So, I mean, clearly this is indicative of us being inside of an if statement if that runs. So we'll give it a quick run. It says we're inside of an if statement. But let's assume that we change this a to 3. Now we give it a run, nothing happens. Because when this condition does not come up true, it skips from this bracket to that bracket. Or if you don't have brackets, it will actually skip the next statement. So if I were to do just this, it'll say we're inside of an if statement, which is not what we're going for, is it? So that's why you use your scoping brackets. So that being said, if conditional goes into the brackets of the if the conditional is true. Now, there are times when we'll use what's known as a false conditional, using what's known as the not equal to operator. So in this case, let's say that I wanted to do this if a is not equal to 4. So let's change this to 3 again. Now, if I want to go into this if statement, if a is not equal to 4, all I need to do is change that to an exclamation point. Because exclamation point equals means not equal to. Now, there is another way of doing that that we'll get into later, where it's a lot more blatant. But then there's issues that come up with it where you might be oversimplifying. So I'll teach that a little later. And lastly, there are tests, Boolean tests. And basically it's going to be less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. So those 4 things. So let's say if a is less than 4, because it is, it's 3. So that means that this statement will now evaluate to true. So if it's less than or equal, it'll do the same thing. If it's greater than, it'll just skip over it. So again, these are going to be the ones that we're focusing primarily on. The double equals, these 4, and the not equal to. There might be some other fanciful stuff I do in the future. But for now, that's really all we're going to be focusing on is those 4 tests. So now, let's see what we can do with an if statement. We'll get rid of that, and we'll set that equal to 0, and let's make a simple if statement and say, or no, system.out.println, and we'll say enter the pay for employee 1, and we'll say int a equals 0 and b equals 0. Alright, and so we'll do, oops, forgot my semicolon. A is equal to input.next int. And by the way, you should never use an int for pay. And oh, guess who accidentally deleted their own string there? I believe it is scanner input equals new scanner system.in. I hate that line. I always forget it, and I always screw it up. So if that's wrong, I apologize. That's why I template it. I think I typed it once in 3 years of doing Java. So we're just going to kind of copy paste this again up top, or down beneath it rather, and we're just going to use cin for b and employee number 2, and we'll do if a is greater than b, system.out.println, employee 1 makes more than employee 2. But now what if that's not the case? Well, clearly I need another half to that if statement where I tell you what happens if that's not true. And that's where we get into 2 other things. There's the else statement, and then there's the else if statement. The else if statement means that we are testing for another if that first one is not true. And this is what's known as a complex if. We'll be getting into nested ifs soon. So we'll be testing if a is less than b. And then we'll be doing basically the same thing. So employee 2 makes more than employee number 1. And then we're going to add one more else if, because there's still one other case, right? The other case is, what if they make the same amount? So we'll change the output here. 1 and 2 make the same amount. And then it's good habit to have a final else statement in case there's an error. So we'll say system.out.println. Something went wrong with the input. Now, in this program, this else will never come up. Because if they enter a non-integer number, it's going to crash the program. But it's good to get into this habit of having this else here. And you'll see why down the line. But for now, let's give this a run. And let's say employee number 1 makes $2,500 a month. Employee number 2 makes $2,501. What an ass. And so employee number 2 is now making more than employee number 1. And now what I want you guys to do, and this is going to be your homework, as this is, I believe, lesson number 6 that I'm working on now, I hope. I want you guys to allow input for 3 different employees and calculate the taxes taken out of their check for each of them. And let's do it this way. I'm running with United States stuff here. If you guys are in Great Britain or Australia or some other exotic place, please feel free to do this with the taxes for your country. But for the US, we're just going to run with the idea that it's, let's say, 22% federal, maybe 12% state, and 5% Social Security. So run with that and, allow input for their wages and then calculate that and say how much is being taken out by each. And maybe you'll want to add different tax brackets to it. And maybe you'll want to say, if they make more than this amount, then do this to it and charge them this tax rate. I want you guys to incorporate if into it, but how you do so is really going to be up to your discretion. Maybe you'll allow for them to be a federal or a state employee, so maybe they don't have to pay those taxes. I'm not sure how it's going to work in other countries. I know as a state employee myself, I don't have to pay state taxes, or if I do, it's some ridiculously minimal amount because that's what I get paid out of. So, and again, I only work during the school year. I'm not working now. With all that being said, this has been if statements simply and quickly. Hopefully I've taught you guys a little bit more than you knew when you came in this time. If you have any questions about this, please ask me in one of the many ways to get in touch with me. The best tends to be the CPP for Beginners forum or on IRC. I'm on Reddit all the time as well, so you guys can shoot me a message there. I'm Demon Sky on IRC and Servoc9 or Serivoc9 on Reddit. So shoot me a message sometime, alright? Have a good night, everyone.